Hello, you're tuned in to Word Power, the podcast where we learn new English words every day.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Academic Edge. I'm Zia.
And I'm Jane. We're so glad you could join us today for what I think is going to be a super practical episode, especially for anyone diving into research, essays, or just trying to sound a bit more, academic.
Absolutely, Jane. Today we're tackling some core vocabulary words that are fundamental to study and research. These aren't just fancy words, they're tools that help us think, write, and communicate more clearly and precisely.
Exactly. And we're not just going to list them, we're going to break down their pronunciation, explain what they really mean, and even throw in some tips for remembering their spellings because, let's be honest, some of these can be tricky.
So let's jump right in with our first word, and it's one you'll hear all the time. Define. That's D-E-F-I-N-E, and it's pronounced define, with the emphasis on the second syllable.
Define. So often, when a teacher says, define this term, my mind just blanks. What's the best way to think about it?
Think of it as setting clear boundaries. To define something means to state or describe exactly its nature, scope, or meaning. You're essentially drawing a line around the concept so everyone understands what it is and what it isn't.
Okay, so it's not just giving a synonym, but really giving a full, precise explanation.
Precisely, if you're asked to define democracy, you wouldn't just say freedom. You'd explain it as a system of government where citizens exercise power, either directly or through elected representatives. You'd include its core characteristics.
Got it. And for spelling define, I guess thinking of definite or definition helps. They all share that root fin, meaning end or limit, which makes sense with setting boundaries.
Excellent connection, Jane. That fin root is a great mnemonic. Moving on, our next word is demonstrate. That's D-E-M-O-N-S-T-R-A-T-E. And you pronounce it demonstrate, with the stress on the first syllable.
Demonstrate. I usually think of science class like demonstrating an experiment.
That's a perfect example. To demonstrate means to show clearly by example, action, or evidence. It's about proving something, often visually or through a clear logical argument. You're not just talking about it, you're showing it.
So if I'm writing an essay, I wouldn't just say, this is true. I'd need to demonstrate it with specific examples or data?
Exactly. You might demonstrate the effectiveness of a teaching method by presenting student test scores, or demonstrate a theoretical concept with a case study. It's about tangible proof or observable action.
For spelling demonstrate, I always remember demonstration, which has the same root, and it's I-M-E and not dem-un, which sometimes trips people up. So D-E-M-O-N-S-T-R-A-T-E. Got it.
Great tip. Our third word is closely related but distinct. Illustrate. That's I-L-L-U-S-T-R-A-T-E, pronounced illustrate, with the accent on the first syllable.
Illustrate. When I hear that, I picture drawings or diagrams.
That's a very common association and a good one. To illustrate means to explain or make something clear by using examples, charts, pictures, or even vivid descriptions. While demonstrate often involves proving, illustrate is more about clarifying and illuminating a concept.
So if I'm explaining a complex idea, I might illustrate it with an analogy or a story, even if I'm not physically showing something.
Precisely. A philosopher might illustrate an abstract concept like existentialism with a relatable scenario from everyday life. You're helping your audience visualize or grasp the idea through a concrete example.
I see the difference now. Demonstrate is like prove with action, and illustrate is clarify with examples. And for spelling, it's two L's, I-L-L-U-S-T-R-A-T-E. I think of illustration again helps cement that double L.
Fantastic. Up next, a word that's foundational to any kind of argument or research. Evidence. E-V-I-D-E-N-C-E. Pronounced illustrate, accent on the first syllable.
Evidence. This sounds like something a detective would look for, right?
Exactly. In academics, it's no different. Evidence refers to the facts, data, or information that indicates whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. It's the basis for your conclusions, the reason you believe something to be true.
So without evidence, it's just an opinion.
Absolutely. Whether you're writing a history paper, a scientific report, or a literary analysis, you need to provide evidence to back up your claims. This could be quotes from a text, statistics from a study, historical documents, or experimental results.
And for spelling, it's a nonce at the end, not a somlic presence, E-V-I-D-E-N-C-E. I just try to remember evident, which means obvious or clear, so evidence makes things clear.
That's a perfect connection, Jane. Very helpful. Our fifth word is a cornerstone of the scientific method, hypothesis. Hypothesis, pronounced hypothesis, with the stress on the second syllable.
Hypothesis. This one always feels a bit intimidating, like it belongs in a lab coat.
Well, it certainly does in science, but it applies broadly to any field where you're starting an investigation. A hypothesis is a proposed explanation for something made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. Think of it as an educated guess or a testable prediction.
So it's not a fact, it's an idea you're going to test.
Exactly. You formulate a hypothesis, then you design an experiment or research project to see if your hypothesis holds true. For example, my hypothesis is that students who listen to classical music while studying will perform better on tests. Then you test that.
That makes sense. And for spelling hypothesis, I try to break it down hypo like hypothetical and thesis like an argument. HYPOTHESIS. And that O in hypo rather than an U is important.
Excellent breakdown, Jane. That hypo prefix often means under or below, so it's like a theory that's under investigation. Next up, we have criteria. CRITERIA, pronounced criteria, with the accent on the second syllable. This one's interesting because it's a plural noun.
Oh, right. The singular is criterion, isn't it? That always messes people up.
You got it. Criteria are the principles or standards by which something may be judged or decided. They're the rules or benchmarks you use to evaluate something.
So if I'm grading a project, the criteria would be the rubric, like clear thesis statement, strong evidence, proper formatting?
Exactly. Those are the standards you're using to assess the project's success. Or if you're selecting a research topic, you might have criteria like relevance, feasibility, and availability of resources.
That really clarifies it. And yes, remembering that criteria is plural is key. One criterion, many criteria. For spelling CRITERIA, I try to remember right in the middle, like a right way to judge something.
That's a clever way to remember it. Finally, we come to a word we've actually touched upon before, in episode 2, if you recall, interpret. That's INTERPRET, and it's pronounced interpret, with the emphasis on the second syllable.
Ah, yes, interpret. I remember we talked about how different people can interpret the same piece of art or literature in different ways.
Spot on, Jane. To interpret means to explain the meaning of information, words, or actions. It's about understanding and explaining something in a particular way, often drawing conclusions or making sense of something that isn't immediately obvious.
So it's not just stating what something is, but what it means.
Exactly. When you interpret data from an experiment, you're not just listing the numbers. You're explaining what those numbers signify. When you interpret a historical event, you're analyzing its causes, effects, and broader significance.
A cara to evaluatur by Bifeste. And it often involves a degree of subjective analysis, right? Your interpretation might differ from someone else's, even with the same information.
Absolutely. That's why providing evidence to support your interpretation is so crucial, bringing us back to one of our earlier words. For spelling interpret, INTERPRET, I think of inter meaning between and pret like present or preface. You're presenting a meaning.
That's a good way to break it down, and it avoids the common mistake of interpret with an E at the end.
So there you have it, 7 powerful academic vocabulary words that can truly transform your ability to communicate effectively in your studies and research.
From defining your terms with precision to demonstrating your points with solid evidence, illustrating complex ideas, forming testable hypotheses, setting clear criteria, and interpreting your findings, these words are your intellectual toolkit.
My biggest tip is to not just memorize them, but to actively try and incorporate them into your speaking and writing. The more you use them, the more natural they'll become.
And remember, these aren't just for essays. Use them when you're thinking critically, discussing ideas with friends, or even explaining things to family members. The clearer your language, the clearer your thought process.
Indeed, we hope this episode has given you some valuable tools and confidence for your academic journey. Thanks so much for tuning in to Academic Edge.
We'll catch you next time. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing those boundaries.
Hello, you're tuned in to Word Power, the podcast where we learn new English words every day.